Hi everyone, my name is Maya Chen. I'm 36 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed that taking care of your parents was the most honorable thing a person could do. I believed it so deeply that I gave them everything, not everything I had to spare, everything, period. And for a long time, 13 years to be exact, I told myself it was love. I told myself they needed me. I told myself I was doing the right thing. I told myself that one day, when they were comfortable and stable and safe, it would all make sense. I was wrong. 2 months ago, I sat in a hospital bed, hooked up to an IV, being told that my blood pressure was dangerously high for a woman my age. And the nurse, this sweet woman named Terry, she asked me if I had a support system, someone she could call. I gave her my sister's number, and while I was lying there, barely conscious, my sister answered a question I hadn't asked. She said, "Don't worry about Mom and Dad. They still have Maya's money." She meant it to be comforting. It destroyed me. Because in that moment, everything I had spent 13 years believing, every sacrifice I had made, every birthday I had skipped, every vacation I had never taken, every apartment I had never rented, every dream I had put on hold, it all snapped into focus. There was no money. There had never been any savings. And I was the only one who hadn't known. Let me back up. I grew up in a middle-class household in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. My parents immigrated from Taiwan in the 1980s. My dad worked in logistics for a manufacturing company. My mom worked part-time at a dry cleaner for most of my childhood. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. Money was always a quiet stress in the house, not a screaming fight kind of stress, more like this constant low hum underneath everything. I have one sibling, my younger sister Lily. She's 3 years younger than me. And I want to be careful here, because I know how these stories go online, and I don't want to oversimplify what happened. Lily wasn't born a bad person. She was just the favorite. Everyone knew it. Even Lily knew it. She was the pretty one, the social one, the one my mom would take shopping and my dad would brag about at the dinner table. I was the studious one, the responsible one, the one who was going to figure it out. I figured out a lot. I got a full scholarship to Ohio State. I graduated with a degree in accounting. I landed a job at a mid-sized firm in Cincinnati. By 23, I was making decent money. Not rich, but stable. Independent, I was proud of myself. And then my dad lost his job. I was 23 years old, 6 months into my first real job, when my mom called and said, "Dad's company is downsizing. He has some savings, but we don't know how long it will last. We don't want to bother you, but," that word, but. I sent them $500 the next day. I told myself it was temporary. The first year, I sent money here and there, a few hundred when they asked. Sometimes $700 or $800 if my dad had a medical bill. I told myself I was a good daughter. I told myself this is what families do. My dad got a new job eventually, lower pay but steady. And the requests didn't stop. My mom started calling more. She'd talk for 20 minutes about her day, about the neighbor's new car, about Lily's new friends, and then right at the end she'd say, "Oh, before I forget, we're a little short this month." I want to say I noticed the pattern immediately. I didn't. I was 24. I was still building my life. I thought this was just a rough patch. My parents had sacrificed so much for me. They worked hard. They came to this country with nothing. How could I say no? By the time I was 25, I had started sending $200 a month consistently. By 26, it was $1,500. By 27, it had settled at $900 a month, and somehow that number just became the reality. It wasn't a formal arrangement. There was no conversation, no agreement, no repayment plan. It was just what I did every month, the way you pay rent or a car note. Except the thing I was paying for was invisible. I couldn't see it, I couldn't touch it. I told myself they were saving it. I told myself it was going into retirement. I told myself my parents were smart, careful, practical people who understood the value of money because they had grown up without it. I want you to know, if you've ever been in a situation where you wanted so badly to believe something that you just didn't ask questions, you already understand exactly where this is going. Here is what $2,900 a month costs you over 13 years, if you're wondering. It costs you your apartment. I lived with 2 roommates until I was 31 years old because I couldn't afford my own place. My coworkers thought I was just quirky. I let them think that. It costs you your relationships. I dated a guy named Derek for almost 2 years. He wanted to move in together. I kept stalling. Eventually, he said, Maya, I don't understand why you're always so financially stressed. You make good money. I couldn't explain it. We broke up. It costs you your health. I skipped dental appointments for 3 years running. I had a tooth that needed a crown that I kept putting off because I genuinely could not justify the out-of-pocket cost. That tooth eventually got infected. I cried in the dentist's chair at 32 years old, not from the pain, from the shame. And it costs you your future. By the time I was 35, my retirement account was anemic. My emergency fund was just barely 3 months of expenses. My friends were talking about buying homes. I was still calculating whether I could afford to get my windshield fixed. But every month, the transfer went out, $1,900, to my parents. And every time I started to feel resentful, every time that small, guilty voice in the back of my head whispered, something is wrong here, I would get a call from my mom saying how grateful they were, how Dad was feeling better, how they didn't know what they'd do without me, and I would feel ashamed for doubting them. That is how it works. I know that now, but I didn't know it then. The first crack in the wall happened when I was 33. My cousin Kevin, my mom's nephew, came to visit from California. Kevin is the kind of person who just says things, no filter. He sat at my parents' kitchen table, looked around their house, and said, Wow, Aunt Linda, you guys really upgraded. New furniture, new TV, you're living good. My mom laughed it off. My dad smiled. I stared at the furniture. It was new. I hadn't noticed because I visited so rarely. I was always working. But now that Kevin said it, I could see it. The couch was new. The TV was enormous and definitely new. There was a new dining set I didn't recognize. I asked my mom when they got all of it. She waved her hand and said, Oh, little by little. Don't worry about it. That night, I told myself they must have found some good deals. Maybe my dad got a bonus. I went home and sent the transfer the next week like always. But the voice in the back of my head got a little louder. A few months later, I called home on a Tuesday evening and nobody answered. I called my mom's cell, no answer. I called my dad's cell, no answer. An hour later, my mom texted me a photo. She was at a resort in Florida. Her and my dad and my sister Lily. Lily surprised us with a trip, my mom wrote. Isn't she wonderful? I sat with my phone in my hand for a very long time. Lily didn't have money. She never had money. She worked in retail management, and she was always complaining about being broke. How had she paid for a resort trip to Florida? I didn't ask. I should have asked. Let me tell you about the night everything changed. It was March. I had been dealing with headaches for weeks. The kind that sit right behind your eyes and don't fully go away. I thought it was stress. I was working extra hours on a year-end audit. I wasn't sleeping well. I hadn't eaten properly in days. On a Thursday night, I woke up at 2 in the morning and my heart was pounding so hard I thought I could hear it in the room. My hands were numb. I couldn't tell if I was having a panic attack or something worse. I called 911. At the hospital, they told me my blood pressure was 178 over 112. The ER doctor, a calm woman with a very direct manner, told me I was on the edge of a hypertensive crisis. She asked me about my stress levels, my sleep, my eating. She asked me if I had financial worries. I almost laughed. They admitted me overnight. And that's when Nurse Terry asked me who she should call. I gave her Lily's number. Lily showed up around midnight. She sat beside me and held my hand and told me not to worry. And then, trying to comfort me, she said, Seriously, Maya, don't stress about money. Mom and Dad still have all your savings from the last couple years. If you needed it, you could probably ask them. I turned to look at her. What savings? I said. Something shifted on Lily's face. A confusion, and then a recognition, and then something that looked almost like guilt. The money you send them, she said carefully. I just assumed they've been saving it. You assumed, I said. There was a long silence. Then Lily said quietly, Maya, how much have you been sending them? I told her. The color drained from her face. I left the hospital the next afternoon. I drove to my apartment, sat at my kitchen table, and opened a spreadsheet. I went back through 13 years of bank statements. I had them all. I'm an accountant. I keep everything. I added up every single transfer. The total was $296,400. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I called Lily. I need you to tell me everything you know, I said. No protecting anyone. Just tell me the truth. Lily was quiet for a long time, and then she told me. She told me that for at least the past 8 years, our parents had been supplementing her rent. Not with their own money, with mine. She hadn't known where the money came from at first. She just knew that whenever she was short, Mom would quietly cover it and say, "Don't mention this to Maya." She told me they paid for 2 of her cars. She told me about the vacations. She told me about the kitchen renovation in their house, the new appliances, the Florida trip, a weekend they took to Niagara Falls. She told me that last Christmas our parents had given her $4,000 to pay off her credit card debt. "I thought it was their savings," Lily kept saying. "I swear, I thought it was their own savings." "They never told me it was your money." I believe her, mostly. But I also know that Lily never asked. And maybe there's a version of this where she didn't want to ask, where it was easier not to know. I understand that feeling. I lived it for 13 years. I need you to sit with me for a second here, because I want to make sure you understand what this number means. $296,400. That is a house. In most parts of Ohio, that is a fully paid off house. That is a retirement fund. Invested at even modest returns, that money could have been my entire financial future. That was 13 years of sacrifice. And not a dollar of it went where I thought it was going. I called my parents on a Sunday morning. I asked them if they could meet me for lunch. I told them I needed to talk. My mom said, "Of course, sweetheart, is everything okay?" I said, "I'll explain when I see you." We met at a diner near their house, neutral ground, public enough that no one would make a scene. Or so I thought. I waited until we'd ordered. I waited until the coffee came, and then I put a printed copy of the spreadsheet on the table. I added it up, I said. Every transfer, 13 years, $296,400. My dad looked at the paper. He didn't say anything. My mom looked at the paper, then looked at me, and said, "What is this?" "It's a record," I said, "of every dollar I've sent you since I was 23 years old." My mom set down her coffee cup. "Maya, I don't understand why you're doing this." "Because I'm in the hospital 2 weeks ago with my blood pressure through the roof," I said. And I kept my voice even. I kept it quiet. Because I have almost nothing saved for retirement. Because I have never been able to afford my own home. And because I just found out that this money did not go where I believed it was going. My dad said, "You always gave it freely. We never asked you to keep track." Something in my chest went cold. "You're right," I said. "I gave it freely. I gave it because I thought you needed it. I gave it because I thought you were struggling. I gave it because I trusted you." My mom's face shifted. I can only describe it as a kind of hardening, like a door closing. "We are your parents," she said. "We raised you. We sacrificed for you. This is what children do. This is what family does." "Family," I said, "doesn't fund one child's life with another child's money and never mention it." My dad stared at the table. My mom said, "You gave it freely. We don't owe you anything." I think I had, somewhere in the back of my mind, been hoping for an apology, for an explanation, for some version of my parents that would look at that spreadsheet and feel something, some recognition of what I had given up, what it had cost me. Instead, my mother looked me in the eye and said 4 words. "We don't owe you." I put $20 on the table for the coffee. I picked up my spreadsheet, and I left. The weeks after that lunch were the hardest of my life. Not because of my parents. Their response, as brutal as it was, had actually answered a question I'd been afraid to ask. It told me exactly who I had been dealing with all along. No, the hardest part was me, grieving the version of my parents that had existed only in my head. That is a particular kind of loss that nobody talks about. When you lose a person to death, people bring you flowers. When you lose a person to the truth, when you realize the person you loved and sacrificed for was never quite the person you thought they were, there is no casserole. There is no sympathy card. There is just you, alone with the knowledge, trying to figure out what to do next. I cried a lot. I'm not embarrassed to say that. I called a therapist for the first time in my life. Her name is Dr. Pamela Rhodes, and in our first session, I barely spoke. I just handed her the spreadsheet and sat there. She looked at it for a long time. Then she said, "How long have you been running on empty?" 13 years, I said. She nodded like she already knew. And somewhere in those weeks, as I sat with everything, the grief, the anger, the exhaustion, something else started growing alongside it. Clarity. For the first time in my adult life, I could see the full shape of things. I could see what had been asked of me, what I had given, what it had cost, and what it had bought. And I could see that it was finished. That chapter was closed. I made a decision. I stopped the transfer. On the 1st of the following month, for the first time in 13 years, I did not send $900 to my parents' account. I want to tell you it was easy. It wasn't. My hand hovered over the keyboard for 10 minutes. Then I moved the money into a dedicated savings account I opened that day. A retirement fund I had been neglecting for over a decade. I set up an automatic contribution, $900 a month. The same amount, to myself. My mom called 3 days later. The deposit didn't come through, she said, like it was a bank error. I know, I said. Silence. What do you mean, you know? I mean, I stopped it, I said. I'm not sending money anymore. My mother's voice changed. The softness left it entirely. Maya, your father needs his medication. We have bills. You can't just Mom, I said, and I kept my voice as calm as I could manage. I love you. But I've given this family nearly $300,000 over 13 years. I sacrificed my home, my savings, my health, and my future. And when I asked you about it, you told me you didn't owe me anything. So now I'm making a different choice. She hung up. My dad called an hour later. He tried a softer approach. He said he was sorry if things had gotten out of hand. He said he hadn't meant for things to go this far. He said he missed me. I told him I loved him. I told him I needed time. I told him I was not in a place where I could continue to support the household financially. He said, "So you're just abandoning us?" I said, "Dad, I've been supporting you since I was 23 years old. I'm 36. I need to take care of myself now." He was quiet. Then he said, "Your sister never would have done this." And I almost said, "You're right, Lily never had to." But I didn't. I just said goodbye, and I hung up. I need to talk about Lily for a moment, because her part in this story is complicated, and I don't want to do it unfairly. Lily and I had a long, painful conversation about 6 weeks after the lunch. She came to my apartment, and she brought food, and she sat across from me on the couch, and she said, "I need you to know that if I had known where the money was coming from, I never would have accepted it." I believe her. Mostly. I also know that Lily had a way, like a lot of people who've been the favorite their whole lives, of not asking questions whose answers might be uncomfortable. She had been insulated from certain truths because she had always been insulated. She had never been the one expected to sacrifice, so she had never developed the instinct to look for it. We're not close the way we used to be. I don't know if we ever will be again. Not because of hatred, I don't hate her, but because some things, once you see them clearly, can't be unseen. And she represents something in my life that I'm still processing. She has since had her own conversation with our parents. I wasn't there for it. She told me it didn't go well. She told me that when she asked them directly why they had never told her the money was mine, our mother said, "What difference does it make where it comes from?" Lily was quiet for a long time after she told me that. Then she said, "I'm sorry, Maya. I'm genuinely sorry. That was enough for me. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. Here is where things stand today, in real numbers, because I'm an accountant, and numbers are how I process the world. I have opened a high-yield savings account. I have begun contributing to a Roth IRA for the first time in my life. I have increased my 401A contributions to the maximum allowed. I found an apartment, a real apartment, my own, just mine, in a neighborhood I love. I signed the lease 6 weeks ago. I stood in the empty living room on the first day and cried, just standing there in the silence because it was mine. Nobody could ask me for it. Nobody could take it. I got my tooth fixed. I made an appointment with my doctor and started blood pressure medication. I started sleeping again. My parents have reached out several times. The conversations vary. Sometimes my mother calls crying. Sometimes my dad sends texts that read like guilt trips. Once, they drove to my apartment without calling ahead. I saw them on the building camera, waited 20 minutes, and then they left. I have not let them in, not yet. Maybe not ever. I don't know. I am in therapy, and I am working through what I actually want that relationship to look like, if I want it at all. Because here's what nobody tells you about family estrangement. It doesn't feel like victory. It doesn't feel righteous. It feels quiet, and lonely, and relieved, and sad, all at the same time. It feels like you finally put down something impossibly heavy, and you didn't realize until it was off your back that you'd been hunched for so long. I've been doing a lot of thinking about the version of myself that started those transfers at 23. She was young. She was proud. She wanted her parents to know she had made it, that their sacrifices had meant something, that she was the kind of daughter who showed up. She believed that love meant giving, and she gave and gave and gave until she had almost nothing left. She wasn't naive. She was just devoted. And devotion, when it isn't met with honesty, can become a trap. I wish I could go back and put my arm around that 23-year-old and say, you can love your parents and still protect yourself. You can honor your family and still ask hard questions. Sacrifice is beautiful, but only when it's mutual, only when it's seen, only when it doesn't cost you your entire future. She would have cried, probably. She would have argued. She would have said, but they need me. And I would say, they'll find a way. They always do. You need yourself more. I posted this because I know I'm not alone. I know there are people watching this right now who are doing some version of what I did. Maybe not the same amount. Maybe it's $500 a month. Maybe it's groceries every week. Maybe it's covering rent just until things settle down, and it never settles down, and you never ask why, and years go by. If that's you, if any part of this story sounds familiar, I'm asking you to look at the numbers. I'm asking you to do what I was too afraid to do for 13 years. Add it up, write it down, look at it. You deserve to know the truth about where your money is going. You deserve to know what you are building and what you are sacrificing. You deserve to ask the hard questions, even when asking feels like betrayal. It's not betrayal, it's just honesty. And honesty is the one thing they could never give me. That's my story. Thank you for listening. And if this hit close to home, drop something in the comments. I read every single one. Knowing I'm not alone has made this year survivable. Take care of yourself. For real this time.